Principal Matters Podcast, episode 503. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters episode. Jen, this is going to be a conversation with our friends TJ Vari and Joseph Jones. Man, they're just legacies in the work of school leadership in the roles as principals, assistant superintendent, consultants, authors. They were on the show several years ago with Principal L. This time I invited them back because the two of them have a new book. So we're going to be sharing that feedback here in just a moment. But we're releasing this in June, and there are some people that have already wrapped up their school year and others that are still finishing out. Here's the question of the week. How do you know when you should stay or leave? I'm in a place in my career where I'm wanting to do something different, not finding as much joy in my role as in the past. What should I do?
I was just talking about this with an educator this morning. It's wild that this question came. What do you think, Will? I'll let you. I always go first.
Because I've heard this question in so many different variations, and it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. And I almost hesitate to say this out loud because I don't want anybody to buy the book as an excuse to exit a position. But I had two different people call me this week, Jen, who said they're pulling the trigger on the next thing because they read that book. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm starting to get nervous. If this book is maybe encouraging people to do things risky. And she was like, well, they're grown adults. If they read your book and they make the decision that they want to do something else, that's their decision. You're not responsible for that. And I felt better. But so I would say to this person, first of all, whether you should stay or whether you should leave is not something I'm going to answer for you. But I do think that question of, I want to do something different, I'm not finding as much joy in my role, that's where the heart of the I think the question's coming from. And so, Jen, I'll say something really fast that I unpack in the book in many chapters, but that is that normally a decision like this should not be an A or a B decision. It shouldn't just be, well, I'll stay here and not be happy or go there and be happy. The question is the answer is usually more nuanced than that. And so I like to encourage leaders, if they really want to go deep in their own thinking, sit down and write out at least 3 different things that you can imagine yourself doing that would bring you joy. 1, right where you are. How would that look different to bring you more joy where you are? 2, if you could go to another place that would be a logical transition where you could discover that joy, what might that be? And then 3, and this is my favorite question of all, if I could make a decision where my fear of failure was not a concern and where money wasn't the option, what would I do? Because then that's going to open up those things that you really care the most deeply about. And then you can decide how they may fit within that A or that B category, or whether there's a C category where that jump could be possible too. But that's the kind of thought experiments I've had to go through, Jen. And I just said in less than a couple of minutes, probably 10 years of processing that it took me to get to the place where I could just say that process out loud, because I'm a thinker and I care deeply about doing the things that bring me joy.
Right. When I read this question, everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. But the reason people struggle with this question is they never know what the next thing is going to be. Is it going to be better or worse? Mm-hmm. And so really, in a lot of ways, this question is about risk. Mm-hmm. Am I a kind of person who's going to take a risk on something I don't know about? When people ask me this, I usually say, if you're asking, you should look. Because that tells me you're feeling a little bit restless and you are curious about what else is out there. And there are people, one of my best friends has taught 4th grade in the same classroom for almost 30 years. Perfectly happy. It has never crossed her mind to go look for something else. And I work in a place where it's easy to get a transfer. She just doesn't want to. She's great. She's happy. Every day is a joy for her. But if you're asking, maybe it's something you explore. And we can't be so risk averse that we choose, to your point, that we choose unhappiness. One of the things I did just this week, actually in a virtual training with New York City charter schools, we did an exercise where we broke down the difference between exhaustion and burnout. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to write about that in an upcoming newsletter because I think this is a really essential question. I think many times we overuse the word burnout. Mm-hmm. when we mean something else, and we're not burned out at with the work or the mission. We're burned out with the day to day. So that's another question to ask yourself: am I just tired, or can I not do this anymore? And that's a real important distinction you make before you jump ship and do something that you're doing out of panic rather than desire.
Oh my gosh, Jen, I can't wait to read that post. So, Principal Matters listeners, be listening, because I'm going to ask you to talk about it, Jen, in an upcoming Monday Matters episode. So I can't wait for that. There's another book that was helpful for me 10 or 15 years ago by Dan Miller called 48 Days to the Work You Love. And it's been a long time since I read it, so I'm not sure if I could still recommend it. But what I liked about that book was it was a helpful way for me to kind of workshop my own thoughts and skills to see what am I best suited for. And it actually reaffirmed to me that I should stay in education. That was a helpful book. Another book I love is called, it's by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And it's called Designing Your Life. And these are Stanford design engineering professors who wrote their book for an elective course they were teaching to college students, asking these same questions. How do I know I'm going to do the right thing? So they designed a course to help you, again, workshop some of those thoughts and get them out. And there's some great practices in the book. I did some of them, and the others I had already been doing. I was like, I've already done that practice. And so I want to share those as resources. And then if you haven't read Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love, just a warning, you'll probably want to
change jobs.
You might want to take a risk. And so if you read it, but that might be a good summer read for them, Jen. So I know we're going to jump into our wonderful conversation with TJ Vari and Joseph Jones. So how can our listeners stay connected with you this summer?
Yep, they can find me at jenschwanke.com.
And you can find today's resources at our website at williamdparker.com. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the U.S. show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that iExcel is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit iexcel.com/PM to get started.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back on another episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. And I'm here today with my special guests, TJ Vari and Joseph Jones, to talk about time, tools, and tactics of instructional leadership. Joseph Jones and TJ Vari have spent years as instructional leaders in various schools and districts, and they provided professional learning and coaching in hundreds of schools and with hundreds of school leaders. They have tested strategies that they recommend with principals and assistant principals and teacher leaders, and they understand that the work that we ask school leaders to do is complex and time sensitive. They also know that schools are filled with daily distractions that often derail leaders away from the most important work of being in classrooms, observing, providing feedback, and providing quality instructional leadership for their students. And they've shared many of these lessons in so many books. They're the authors of Invest in Your Best, Passionate Leadership, 7 Mindsets for School Leaders, Retention for Change, Building a Winning Team, Candid and Compassionate Feedback, and their newest book, Time, Tools, and Tactics of Instructional Leadership, a Principal's Guide to Leading Learning Momentum. TJ and Joe, you've been on my show before. Welcome back. Can you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Will, for having us back. We truly appreciate it. You know, I think something that I would probably fill in the gap is TJ and I never really expected to write in the sense of like models and frameworks. One thing we realized, and I think this is indicative of our own work, but just working with others across the country. This book was really born out of frustration, and often, principals care deeply about the work. They work incredibly hard, but they often fail at doing instructional leadership well. And it's not because they're failing because they're not good at it. A lot of times they just lack the systems. And this book emerged with a lot of different models that we created and frameworks that really just provide an architecture for the leader until they can do it on their own well. Because, when we learn something, we don't always apply it right away. And we're also not always great at it from the beginning. And I would say that was something that just kind of fell into our lap. We didn't think about it at first. It wasn't something that was conscious. But as we really were doing this work, we thought, we got to put something else in here to really help leaders. So the frameworks and models kind of, I think, was a surprise. They're not new to us, but originally it wasn't by design.
Yeah. A book that's born from frustration means you guys are in the middle of the work. You know what leaders are facing. TJ, what gaps do you want to fill in on that intro?
Well, I can just kind of piggyback on that a little bit to say Joe and I are impact junkies. When we build our Schoolhouse 302 business plan, all of the products and services are about impact. So we talk about how many books are we going to get in the hands of school leaders? How can we coach these time tools and tactics, these strategies that we've created, one-to-one coaching, group masterminds? Of course, we like to be out in front of the audience doing the keynotes, but we're really about impact and building relationships. And a lot of our recent clients and recent contracts have been multi-year. And Will, you and I have talked about that. Mm-hmm. And that is really the name of the game. Is we believe every school leader should have a coach. And we think multi-year coaching, multi-year professional development is the way to go, and the future of building a capacity of school leaders, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more about on the show today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Okay. Where are you guys geographically so people know kind of what part of the country they're listening to today?
So both of us are proud Delawareans, born and raised, the 302, and which, speaks to our name as well, the Schoolhouse 302. Originally, well, people even said, do you think that'll limit you? And I was like, no, it identifies us, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So, we consider ourselves a small wonder, the first state, and, so we're coming to you from Newark and Wilmington, Delaware.
Well, Delaware is one of those states that I have yet to go to, guys. So I'm waiting for that invitation, TJ, and Joe, to get up there and hang out with you guys. But I'm just going to give a quick shout out to John Tanner, who's a principal at the district, TJ, where you served for so long. We've become friends through some coaching work too. So I know he listens to the podcast, and you guys are everywhere. I saw you in Seattle. I've seen you at other conferences. I had you on the show several years ago with Principal L. TJ, I've had you back on the show too. So this won't be the first time Principal Matters listeners have heard your names. But one of the things that I loved about the preview copy you gave me of your book, and by the time this recording comes out, it'll be live and ready, is how you just so specifically tackle the problems that leaders are facing. You do it with 9 principles, but I loved how you broke it down into 7 stories. And I'm just going to read these chapter headings out loud, if it's okay for listeners, because every one of them should be a chapter. Mara can't find the time. David's teachers are frustrated. Sandy's teachers are deflated. Laura's teachers need a coach. Tim's questions are condescending. Larissa's feedback isn't coherent, and Jamar's teachers are pushing back. And what I loved about all of those is from your own work and the work you do with leaders, these are the things that come up every single day. And sometimes they all come up in a day. So I wanted to ask you to just take a moment. First of all, if you want to give me any framework for why you designed the book the way you did, but I'd love it if you guys could just take a couple of those principles and talk about why that's a frustration that leaders are facing and some of the solutions you found for them.
Much of the design was from TJ, to be totally frank. So TJ, did you want to speak to that and head this one up?
Sure can, but you know that when we edit, we tear each other's ideas apart. So it's quite a thing to see on paper. But that's a good thing. That's what makes the book work. That's what makes the partnership work. those 7 things, so there's 9 chapters, there's an intro and a conclusion. Those 7 are the heart of the book. It was designed specifically that way. Each chapter, including the intro and conclusion, have a strategy in. There's 3 time strategies, there's 3 tools and 3 tactics. So that makes up the 9, is designed that way. The 7 stories, which were really fun to write, they're linear. They build on one another. So Mara's problem is she can't find the time to get in classrooms. So we solved that for her. And then David does get into classrooms, but his teachers are frustrated because his feedback isn't landing. It's not as meaningful for him. He's all over the place. And his problem isn't time. And in strategies, he doesn't have the look for, so everything's random. And then it just continues to build on that. Sandy's teachers are deflated because she's giving really precise feedback, and her feedback is good, but she doesn't use praise enough. And we always start with praise in our models. Laura's teachers need a coach, and that's because she's not doing performance coaching. She's got the praise part down, but she's not correcting anything, and they want to get better. Tim's questions are condescending. He's asking questions that he already knows the answer to versus open-ended questions, and we unpack that. Larissa's feedback isn't coherent, meaning the teachers don't know what to do with it next, and it's not tied to the vision. It's not tied to professional development, incremental progress. We have a model for that. And then finally, dealing with resistant teachers. Jamar's teachers are getting all of what we've built over time, and they don't want to change. And so he's got to figure that out. Joe, I'll pitch it over to you for the coach, because each of the school leaders in the book, just like we say they should all have coaches, these guys do have a coach. In fact, they have the same one.
Yeah, it's really important for us, just really as practitioners, and we consider ourselves constant learners as well, to build in this idea of someone who does get it. And this idea and concept was inspired, I'll give credit to Robin Sharma from the 5 a.m. Club. And just in that book, there's just this gentleman who gets it, who just understands, gets it, and who we all aspire to become. I haven't met a leader who truly doesn't want to become the best expression of themselves. But there's hindrances. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a lack of commitment. It's not necessarily a lack of will. And it's not even a lack of skill. You hear that sometimes. What we have found sometimes, it's like with Mara, it's a lack of systems. It's not a lack of her desire. She just doesn't have the systems in place to free her up to get into the classrooms. And we see that often. You'll hear TJ tell the story quite frequently. When he was principal, he had designed a system that in the beginning of the day, he was going to go and visit every classroom every day for 15 to 20 minutes. It didn't take long, but he had a rhythm to his morning. But that also let the front office secretary know that, look, Dr. Vari's not available for the first 15 minutes. So in the book, we introduce Yoda. Everybody resonates with Yoda, and Yoda really helps these individuals through coaching. And it's something near and dear to our heart. TJ mentioned it's something that we do frequently. I just had a phenomenal coaching call yesterday with a veteran principal, and it's amazing just some of the things that eat up our time. And Yoda is introduced into each chapter and helps each one first understand what they don't see. And I think that's what's critical. We often know what we want to do, but we don't see the barriers preventing us from doing it. A great coach holds up a mirror of, understanding and accountability.
Yeah.
And so with that, we do a great job of introducing Yoda, and Yoda taking each administrator through the skill development. And so it comes together very nicely, we think, in the book. And this book actually got some excellent reviews that we were uncertain of, to be honest. We weren't sure if this would resonate with an audience, and it did. And Yoda's just that one individual. And I believe we also have that individual in our life. For me, it's Steve Godowski, when he was my boss, my mentor, my superintendent, and eventually Delaware Secretary of Education. Steve showed me the way, and he had candid conversations with me. A lot of times things I didn't want to hear. And I think when you have that relationship, you have that understanding, you can grow. So Yoda embodies that coach we all want and need.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is so important about coaching, because I coach a lot of leaders too, is being able to listen to that story that they're telling and then being able then to help them identify what's the real challenge here for you. And so what I love about your content is you guys have already had these conversations. You're anticipating the challenges that leaders are going to face every single day. And I'm a summarizer, so I'm just going to say them out loud. Their challenges with time, with providing good feedback, with building strong cultures, with correcting constructively, with asking the right questions, with clarity, and with responding to resistance. I mean, those are just and you don't even cover them all. You guys know there's more, but those are those are the challenges that people are facing every single day. So let's dig a little deep. I'd love to just take one of those, and I don't care who goes next, but just take one of those areas and unpack a little bit of what it looks like when a leader recognizes what the real challenge is, and then how do they move forward toward that.
Let's start with time, because that's the first one. And I would say, yeah, we don't tackle all of what plagues school leaders, but I think we tackle most, if not all, of what plagues them as instructional leaders, right? And so that's what, it's a principles guide, but I think it's mostly a comprehensive guide. It's the tools that we used when we were turnaround school leaders, and it's the things that we coach on when we have the opportunity. Mara can't find the time. The problem with finding the time is that she's doing urgent work and not important work. She's 1 minuted to death. And so she needs systems, like Joe says. And so one of the systems is time blocking. And lots of people are familiar with time blocking. But just because you block the time doesn't mean that's what you're going to do with it. And so one of the concepts is reverse time blocking. And this ultimately is a reflection tool. Like, I want to be clear about that. Meaning, the reverse time blocking is that minute by minute, day by day, you put in what you actually did and you move the things you didn't do. Now, you can go ahead and color code that and do other things. But the point of having that is that you can then look at it at the end of the day and end of the week, and you can reflect on what actually happened. And Will, you and I have talked about this before, and I think we've maybe even talked about it on the show. But when I coach a school leader and we go over time blocking and reverse time blocking, the next time I see them, either the next week, bi-weekly, or monthly, I'm going to ask them to show me their calendar. And the people who are effective did the time blocking and reverse time blocking, and the people who aren't just didn't do it. And so I say to the school leader, look, I'm your accountability partner. I don't hire you. Like, I'm here to support you. You either did it or you didn't do it. But you can't reflect on what you're doing without a tool. Like, the neuroscientists have been super clear about that. Like, we want to be reflective practitioners, but it's really hard to reflect on what you're doing while you're doing it, even after you did it. And so we need a tool. And I've looked at school leaders' calendars. They have whole swaths of time that's not scheduled. And I'm like, what'd you do during that period? And they're like, I don't know, but I was busy. And so we've got to have that tool to be able to look back, because the final piece about it is that there's always a person, a problem. It could be a kid, could be, but there's like 5 or 6 things that are taking up all of your time. And if we could build systems around that, then we won't have those things recurring. I don't know if Joe wants to add to that or pick another one, but we try to go deep on those things in the chapters where they live. And Mara then does find the time. And then, like I said before, David has the time. It's just he doesn't have the look for us.
Yeah, because you and I both know that we are not completely in control, no matter how much we try to pretend that we are. And when the urgent becomes what's driving everything that you do, then the only sensible response to that is either run or plan in advance what I can control before things happen, and then adjust back to those priorities as soon as that fire's out or someone else has been trained to manage it. But without planning for that, like you said, TJ, without planning forward and looking backward, then you're you're just the victim of what's ever happening in the moment. And so there's, I don't know. I've even been thinking about this as I'm setting my own goals for 2026, which is okay. Life teaches you there are so many things outside of your control, but wisdom teaches you that if I don't plan for as much as I possibly can in advance, there's no way I'm going to even get close to reaching those goals. And so part of that time management has to be those intentions. I was in a conference one time where I said to a group of assistant principals, you should already be planning out next year's calendar now. In fact, I would suggest maybe you're already planning out at least 2 years in advance. And there was actually laughter across the room, and I just had to stop and go, wait, that wasn't a joke. Like if you actually want to take control of your time, you have to take control. You can't just let these things happen to you and then plan right before an event or right before the school year starts. And so, Joe, I know you've got some thoughts too.
Yeah, just a couple. I think you made a really critical point, Will, that I want to double down on is when something hijacks your time, when you suddenly get past that, you solve the issue, you get done the phone call, whatever it is, your default can't be an empty space. Your default has to go back to what you were supposed to be doing, which should be high priority, high leverage items. If not, you're going to go to email, you're going to walk around, and you'll do something, but that something may not move the needle of instructional improvement, of student learning. And that's the issue that we've discovered. So planning, it's not that you're planning, your day so oh, this is what I have to do, and it's so rigid you can't bend. It's so that when you do get hijacked, you know exactly what you should do. And I think that the planning your calendar out, I think people laugh because I think they're thinking too small as well. They're thinking increments of like minutes and time. But when your core values drive your work, those are the big rocks that Covey taught us 40, 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. Those are the things you're scheduling. Those are the non-negotiables. Like we know each day we need to eat and drink water and we should walk around and have movement. If you're not doing those three things as a human being, you're not going to survive very long. It's the same as a school leader. What are those things you have to do that really positively influence your school? Once you identify those things, that's what you're scheduling. And that's what you got to realize. No, that's the real work. That's what I actually can plan 10 years out because that won't change. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of leaders fall short. They're afraid, though. And I will say, this is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. People's decision-making skills are weak. And I know some people that's going to hit a nerve, and I know they're going to find some objection, but it's true. It's why we can stand in front of the refrigerator for 5 minutes and not pick something out. Or we just opened it just 5 minutes ago, and we think suddenly something's going to appear in there. It doesn't work that way. Decision-making has to be strong, commit, do, act, and that'll solve a lot of the day's frustrations.
Well, this leads to the next question I wanted to ask you guys because you might be touching a nerve, but I also think it's important to just speak the truth about how often, and you guys call this fear-based leadership, pushes people. And I'm going to quote from your book. You say, leaders take it on as solely their responsibility, even though a positive culture and climate are the result of collective work, not a single person's work. And so part of the dilemma here with these challenges leaders face is this fear-based leadership approach that I am the solution. So I address that, guys, because you've done this work long enough to see what the dangers are with that. But then what's the solution?
Go ahead, Joe.
So it's a huge part. I think what happens as leaders, we come to a point, and I don't know when this happens, you come to an understanding that you have to have all the answers, that the school success is solely your responsibility. And that's just not right. And as you mature as a leader, you realize, no, what we often need more than anything else is collective clarity. And that's what's often lacking, this collective clarity on what we're trying to achieve. Yes, it's my job as the superintendent of the school district I run, Newcastle County Votech, to really navigate the way, set the vision. But I can't do that alone. And I know that. And so you don't want to get into this position where you feel like it's solely your responsibility, because what happens is, the leader actually begins to push harder, control more, and then unintentionally exhaust people. And I've seen this, we've seen it, we've lived it. Culture improves when there's coherence, not when there's added pressure. So when culture is a collective outcome, then you lead with your anchors of what's really important, which again is your core values. You focus on growth, which when you're focused on growth, hopefully that creates alignment. And then you're supporting individuals versus just managing individuals. And that's where you want to get to. That's the place you want to lead from. But when we start to fear that this is solely our responsibility, we play tight. And you hear that in athletics all the time. You're playing scared, you're playing tight, and you see on the court, it's basketball season right now. You'll see it on the court. They go down by 10 points. Some teams, they don't get nervous. They realize, look, we still got 4 minutes on the clock. That's a lifetime. Other teams see 4 minutes and think, oh my God, we're going to lose. And they play tight and they end up losing because they now try to solve everything on their own. They forget the fundamentals. They quit passing when they should pass. And it's no different in our lives as school leaders. So collective clarity is key. TJ, am I missing anything on that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, psychologically, though, we do have to understand that we can't lead from a position of fear. Like, it's just not really possible, right? It's like being negative through gratitude. You can't do both, right? When you have gratitude, it's impossible to be negative. We know this about psychology, so it's really important to remind ourselves of that. I'll just say 2 practical tips, though, because one thing that Joe and I have helped school systems, superintendents, principals, is to build a leadership team. Some school leaders don't even have a leadership team. Elementary schools, we've helped district level. They don't have a team of people around them. They just haven't built the team. Like, that's got to be a step that we take, whether they're new positions, paid positions, some group of people that are around us. The second thing is we find weak leadership teams. Sometimes they have a leadership team, but they're weak. That weakness could be that they're the wrong people, or we're just not developing them. It's not enough to just take your best teachers and put them in a room to help make shared decisions. Those people need help leading. The teaching and leading are a lot alike, but they're very different as well. And so we need teachers to be developed as leaders, not just named as such. And so those are technical tips, like build a team around you, develop them.
Yeah, man, so much wisdom. So let me just wrap up that question with this thought, because if fear is our motivation, then we know we're going to be responding from a value that's based on either self-protection or whatever that is. But then there's also sometimes, I like to call it, sometimes people, they replace the fear with their own ego. So then it's just about, whatever it takes, I'm going to be the leader, or I'm going to, don't question me. So you see that kind of leadership motivation too. But what I hear you guys talking about is the third option. And I've always had a really hard way of describing it. I love it that you call it collective clarity. I would also call it a community of flourishing. How do we create the best kind of learning culture and community that we want? Well, it's not going to happen with just you, but it's also not going to happen if you're constantly responding by just putting out the fires that are causing this thing not to work. And so I know it's really easy for the three of us to sit here and look at this as outsiders who are working in schools. You're not, by saying that, that's not Joe, I know you're on the inside of a district every single day. TJ, I know you're in schools all the time, and so am I. But I'm also thinking about the listeners of the show, principals, assistant principals, directors, people that are stepping into the heat of these moments. Where should they go next? Because you talk a lot about time, tools, tactics. What's one thing they can be thinking about just even today that will help them hold on to that clarity and then take a next best step?
Something TJ knows, I've been harping on this, and this is something we developed early on, is AFA, which is anchor, focus, and align. And it's a tool. It's in the book. But I'll say this, that the biggest mistake I see and the misstep I see is lack of alignment. And this is with our feedback, our walkthrough tools, our professional learning. Not everything connects directly back to the priorities. And that's when staff feels like there's a moving target and they get disillusioned. So if you cannot connect everything back and ensure everything is aligned, you're making a big mistake, and ultimately you're going to frustrate your folks. But that's what I would say alignment is or lack of alignment is what I see the most. And all you have to do is just ask in a meeting, hey, we're looking at this. All right, what's it aligned to? Is it aligned to our core value? In the system I'm in, we've identified 4 core values that we don't deviate from. And if it doesn't align to one of those core values, then we just don't do it. And it can be a great idea. I think that's an important point to make, Will. There's so much out there. This isn't about like good, bad, right, wrong. There's so much going on, though. Most administrators, especially principals, are drinking out of a fire hydrant every day. So make sure your priorities are crystal clear and then align everything to those priorities. And that way, no, this is where we're heading. And it allows you to say no with confidence. Just say, look, that's a great idea, not the right time. And I would say the misalignment is what most schools are missing.
Good stuff, Joe. TJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to back that up with another concept in the book called Principles of Instruction. It's early on with the not having the look-fors and frustrating the teachers. This is David. And what Joe says about anchor, focus, and align. So we're anchoring to the vision. We're focusing on incremental improvement. We're aligning to professional development. The professional development should be on a set of principles of instruction. Now, this is in the world of instruction. We know we need to professional develop our teachers on other things, but I think we're trying to make your lives easier through coaching, through the books that we write, through this alignment, the systems that Joe mentioned earlier. But one of those systems is principles of instruction. This is a set of look-fors. We spend a lot of mental capacity as observers, as in our walkthroughs, I always say as walker-throughers, when we sit down in a classroom and we're working on what we're going to comment on and what we're going to look for. That should be predetermined, pre-established. We say somewhere between 6 and 12 principles of instruction, high leverage strategies, and don't focus on more than 2 or 3 at a time and literally for the whole year. So one of the strategies could be student discourse, and you're trying to improve student discourse in the classroom. Now the teachers have been professionally developed on student discourse. Everybody knows it's a strategy we're working on. We talked about it at the faculty meeting. We have a think, pair, share that everybody's supposed to be practicing. I go do my walkthrough. I sit down in the classroom, and now I use AFA aligned to the student discourse strategy that we just did, and that's what I'm commenting on. No more mental energy on looking around at everything. Now, if it's a complete mess, that's a different story, but that's not most classrooms, right? Most classrooms, we're trying to make that incremental progress over time, and massive change is not likely to happen, but step-by-step incremental progress that's aligned to a vision, that's how we change schools in months, in years, versus decades.
That's so practical, TJ. So listeners, if you want to improve your own instructional leadership and you're trying to think about how to do that with focus, pause, rewind 1 minute and listen to that again, because what TJ just unpacked in a very brief way, you're going to find in the book. But you're also saying, TJ, know what those principles of instruction are that you want to be emphasizing, but let's get clear, 2 or 3, don't, because you're going to have a lot. And let's really focus on that together collectively. That's what we're teaching. That's what we're talking about in staff meetings. And that's what we're looking for in classrooms. And that's what we're reinforcing when we're doing visits, because that kind of clarity equals growth. Joe, you mentioned the basketball analogy. It's not any different than coaching a team. You work on the fundamentals of what you know are going to make the biggest difference in that next game or overall in their health. I know we're coming to the end of our time, and I want to speak to anyone listening, because this is going to be released in May. So we're wrapping up a school year, looking at next already. And I have a lot of people that reach out to me through the show that are either aspiring leaders because they're looking at their first position as a administrator, or maybe they're transitioning, because this time of the year too, when this comes out, people will be thinking about those transitions. If you could speak to that leader who might be facing a new role, what's something from your work or the practices in this book that you would say, keep this in mind? And I don't care who goes first.
I'll mention a few things here. First off, I probably wouldn't sign. I have mentors and coaches by default. Like, I actually even have reciprocal coaching where somebody coaches me who I then coach, and we do that sometimes for fun, but also on a regular basis. Will, you and I have spent some time doing that for one another. I wouldn't sign a contract, I don't think, anymore without predetermining that I can have a coach and that there's a coaching system set up. So ask about that. I think it's a fair ask in the interview or when you get the job. How am I going to be coached? Who can we hire to do that? It's not as expensive as you think. Like, we write these contracts for people to coach them, and they're like, wow, I can get 4 sessions a year for pretty inexpensive. The only other thing that I'll add and then kick it over to Joe is leaders are readers. The average CEO reads 60 books a year. That's the average. I would try to figure out how to read more, get strategies for reading, and I would read about what matters. And the 2 things that I think matter most for school leaders, aspiring school leaders, assistant principals and principals, is leadership, pure leadership, John Maxwell, and others who are the gurus of leadership, and then school leadership, what works in schools. The number of people I coach and I show up and I say, and they tell me something that they're doing. And like Joe said, there's a lot of great ideas out there. It could be a good idea, but I'm like, what evidence do we have? Where'd you come up with that? And like, well, I was sitting on the beach this summer and I was talking to my wife and I'm like, did Marzano say to do that? Did DeFore say to do that? Like, stick with what works. Like, if your PLCs are busted, making some other huge initiative is not the way to go. Like, just fix the PLCs. And so I think fundamentals matter. And that is back to the team part. Like, if you can't dribble, you're probably not going to score. Let's get some things right. So read, and do what the books say before we make something up. Joe?
That's so practical.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in 2 different lanes. It's a wonderful question. And I just had this conversation with a principal I was working with. And I asked, what do you want your school to look like? Like, what do you want it to look like? Like, what do you want the hallways to look like? If class is going on, how many kids should be in the hallway walking around? If I walk into a bathroom, like, what do I want to see graffiti? Do I want all the sinks working? Like, literally just take a moment and think, what do I truly want my school to look like in the classroom, from instruction to climate to appearance? And I just don't think we take enough time to think about, as a leader, what are my expectations? And before even expectations, what are my standards? And so I annoy a lot of those I work with, because I tell them, what would Joe think? Not what I would do, but what would I think? If I saw that, how would I respond to you right now? And they know that because I have an impression of what I know this district should look like. And I just think it's a very practical thing we should do. The second important thing I would say is, remember why you went into this profession. The principalship and any building level responsibility leadership position is exhausting because you're always dealing with other people's problems. And like I say to me, if it gets to my desk, that means other people couldn't solve it. So I'm not paid to make light decisions. I'm not paid to make easy decisions. So I think what you have to remember is, why'd you get into this business? But here's where I would add. Find those 1 or 2, 3, 4 classrooms that make you feel and remember your why. I know you can write it down. I know Simon Sinek says, know your why. Listen, I'm a visual and emotional person. The Italian in me runs deep. So I need to see it. I need to feel it. When I'm having a bad day, I know 2 or 3 classrooms in my district I can go to and remind me, No, Joe, this is precisely why you took this job. That's the difference we're making for kids. And not, I think you have to do that, or this job gets way too lonely, way too exhausting, and way too frustrating too quick. But when you have that why through someone else doing the job, and I could rattle off 5 to 10 teachers right now who are crushing it and make me work harder despite how tired I am. And I think you just got to remember that. So set your standards, know what you're looking for. This is the school I want to lead, and then get there. And then also remember your why, but not written on a sheet of paper, not in some fancy form, through the activity happening in classrooms. And I guarantee that'll really start to recenter you faster than saying a mantra can. And I'm a big believer in all that. I have things written down. TJ jokes with me all the time. I could show you my 3x5 card right now that I keep in my written down. The reality is, though, sometimes I need to see it and feel it.
Yeah, this is why I love doing this podcast so much. Last summer, when we were all in Seattle, I went to dinner with some principals the last night I was there, and there was a administrator who was just taking he was moving from AP to his first principal role, and we just went around the table and did exactly what you guys just did, and it was just so rich. And he came up to me afterwards, and he was like, "Will, I'm just going to say hands down, this dinner was the best PD of this whole conference." And so thank you guys, because what you just poured out for leaders right there was the kind of stuff that I would go to dinner for. I would come sit at a conference to get, but Principal Matters listeners, you're getting this for free today. But this isn't the only opportunity you have for connecting with Joe Jones and TJ Vari. So as we wrap up, guys, how can listeners stay connected with you, your wonderful resources? Principal Matters listeners know that I do a lot of the same stuff you guys do, but I love promoting my friends. So sell yourselves. Let them know how they can find you, how they can connect with you, and any parting words of advice.
Yeah, I would say the easiest thing, go to theschoolhouse302.com. It's theschoolhouse302.com. Simple, you can email us, contact@theschoolhouse302.com, contact@theschoolhouse302.com. We do have 7 books. The latest one, which just got released now that this podcast is airing, Time, Tools, and Tactics of Instructional Leadership. We hope to make an impact with that. We do keynotes. We do 1 and 2 day leadership institutes. Think the retreat, administrative retreat. We come in, we train on the tools, we train on the frameworks that we've built. A lot of that is right on our website at theschoolhouse302.com, one-to-one coaching. So I would say keynotes, one-to-one coaching, retreat planning, full day institutes. We come in, we train your leaders, we build capacity, and we change systems for the better. We're about making an impact and improving student outcomes, and we can't do that without the capacity of our school leaders.
Love it. Joe?
So TJ gave all the good stuff, which is great. I would just say, look, if you're hesitant to send that email or make that call, quit negotiating with yourself. Get out of your head. Having a coach, working with people, talking with people, it can change your life. And I'll just share simply that when I became a superintendent, I know how to run schools. I mean, I know I was a good principal. It was the hardest and toughest and most enjoyable job I've still had to this day. Where I lacked, though, was working with business partners. I knew how to work with communities and families, but specifically with business partners. How do I effectively work with legislators? And so I hired a coach. And it was just someone, and they knew explicitly what I needed and what I was looking for. And that's not selfish. I'm looking to really do things for my students. And so sometimes that might take legislation. That may take industry partners to get something in my schools that I really need. So it's just a different thought process. But I know now I can't do it alone. The reason we suggest people read so much is to get better. Well, one of the fastest ways to get better is reach out and build a community of support. And so, which is why, I'm truly appreciative you, Will, and doing Principal Matters and all the great work you're doing, because, this is how we just continue to give into the system, level each other up. And when people say, what's going to change the future of education in America, I think it starts right here with these type of shows where people can learn and grow.
Well, TJ Vari, Joseph Jones, you guys are legacies, and this has just been such a privilege and honor to have you on the show. And Principal Matters listeners, the new book is Time, Tools, and Tactics of Instructional Leadership with TJ Vari and Joseph Jones. I'll just say one other thing as I close up, and this may or may not be a helpful analogy, but I grew up on a farm, so when you go on a hunt, it's always great to have the best gun. When you two show up, it's like having two. And so I'm just telling you, listeners, if you're looking for a great retreat, a conference you're getting ready to do, I know sometimes you guys work separately, but a lot of times it's the two of them together. And so you are not going to be disappointed with TJ Vari and Joe Jones in the room. Thank you guys for your leadership, and Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters. We'll talk to you again next week. Find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations for my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.